In this episode, I want to explore a simple question. What is the Qur'an? And the answer to that question will be determined by which of two groups you are a member of. Are you a member of the Muslim group? In which case you will say the Quran is the actual speech of God himself, the word of God, wahi, revelation. Or if you are a member of the other group, non-Muslims, you obviously will believe it is the product of a human mind, Muhammad, this 7th century Arabian, and he produced it, or maybe a succession of editors unknown to us who produced it, as some scholars have suggested. So that's a simple binary option, but I want to address it in a slightly different approach by looking at it in simple terms, phenomenologically, by which I mean an approach to the question that seeks to describe the essence of a phenomenon by exploring it from the perspective of those who have experienced it. So what is the experience of those who have heard the Quran recited, or they read it in a book or read it? How do they feel about that? So it's a phenomenological approach. And to explore this, there's always a book. In this case, it is God is Beautiful, the Aesthetic Experience of the Quran by Navid Kermani, who is a German scholar. It says here on the inside back cover, as a scholar who lives in Cologne, in Germany. He's been awarded numerous prizes for his literary and academic work. And this book, he tells us in the foreword, is his PhD thesis, which has proven to be hugely influential. And the reviews on the back cover from Harvard and University of California, Berkeley, saying that this is highly accomplished work, an outstanding work that fills a major lacuna in both the study of the Quran as scripture and the wider study of Muslim faith, practice and spirituality. That's from Harvard University. So I just want to read a short extract from this, which explores the experience of the Quran and what that tells us about the Quran itself. I'm just going to quote from page 110, and as always I will be making a few comments en route. So he says, as Zakashi too recounts among the miraculous qualities of the Quran the fact that it is, quote, always fresh and flourishing in the ears of the listener and on the tongue of the reciter. This may also be an echo of the following sentences of Qadi Iyad, quote, one of them, the miraculous properties of the Quran, is that the reciter never tires of it, and the listener cannot forbear it, and on the contrary, the delight of the recitation only increases the longer one devotes oneself to it and repeats the words, so that one cannot but love it. Its bloom and its freshness never cease. Other recitations, even if they equal the Quran in beauty and eloquence, finish by producing weariness if constantly repeated. But our book fills one as often as one returns to it in seclusion, with enjoyment, and the recitation of it brings happiness even in adversity. This is not found in other writings, so that their admirers have composed melodies for them and devised external means of enlivening their recitation. That is why the Messenger of God described the Quran with words that it does not grow stale no matter how often one recites it, and that its teachings never run dry and its wonders have no end. End quote. We must realize that this testimony to a miracle is perfectly aligned with Umberto Eco's description. Umberto Eco was a recently deceased Italian intellectual and academic and literary figure. With Umberto Eco's description of the reception of works of art. According to Eco, and no one would contradict him, we cannot imagine that an aesthetic form would not be exhausted if we receive it too often in too short a time, and it is beautiful to us only because we have long considered it such, and the enjoyment we now draw out of it is merely the memory of the pleasure we once felt while listening to it. When that happens, it is necessary to put the work of art away for a while in order to be affected by its suggestions anew. Ecke would deny that any text could be immune to this process of habituation. It would contradict all empirical findings and could only be called a miracle. Qadi Iyad would agree, with one exception. To him, the Qur'an is exactly that miracle. Now, the book continues with many fascinating discussions. Al-Ghazali's views as well, which are absolutely very, very interesting. And just on a personal note, I remember a book that's often called the greatest novel in the English language. It's called Middlemarch by George Eliot, who was a 19th century writer. And you'll find often in polls of the greatest works of English literature that this novel is seen as the greatest in English. Obviously, the other great novels, say in Russian, like War and Peace and Dostoevsky's work and so on. But this one is the greatest. And I first read it, 10, 15 years ago, and I was absolutely bowled over by it. I had to put it down at one point. I felt as if it was such an intellectual and psychological feast that I was being overloaded. My senses had been overloaded, and I had to put it down physically because it was just too much. It was just too rich and intellectually powerful, and I needed to distance myself from it. Anyway, I did finish it. Amazing, amazing book. Now, I think about a year ago, after much toing and froing, I decided I would reread it to obviously revisit this extraordinary story. And I got halfway through, and it wasn't not flat, but it didn't in any way energize me and engage me the way it did the first time round. And I didn't finish it. I felt, well, yes, I know what's going to happen next. I know the story, and so is going to do this, and this is going to happen. And I am feeling relatively flat. I mean, it's still enjoyable, but it didn't meet my expectations at all. Now, this passage I've just read suggests that people's experience of the Qur'an is very different, that no matter how often one revisits it, it has this amazing quality of to revivify and refresh and renew the mind and the soul and the heart of the person who encounters it. So phenomenologically, it is a work of transcendence. It encounters one from a source outside of oneself and renews and heals and changes, transforms the reader. And that is extremely unusual for books. Even the greatest work of English literature, George Eliot's Middlemarch, after a 10, 15 year gap, I can't remember how many years, but a lot of years, even then it left me disappointed because of my memory of what it was like. The Qur'an doesn't have that second or third encounter of deflation. It seems to, if anything, raise and elevate the mind and the heart even further. Now, the one thing I would disagree with Naveed was he obviously is a book about the Qur'an, but the Qur'an isn't unique. There's another book that I am also more familiar with than the Qur'an, of course, the Bible. And when I was a Christian, I certainly found this book to profoundly engage me and disturb me and raise questions, but nevertheless it wasn't just like a novel. And I would still say today, although I'm not a Christian now, I don't believe in the Trinity or the Incarnation, anything like that, but there are passages here, for example, in the Psalms, Psalm 23, for example, which phenomenologically, I still engage them as transcendent, as word from God. I don't dismiss this at all. But there are passages in this book which have always left me cold. I mean, the great genealogies, go endlessly. Someone begat, somebody begat so-and-so, who begat so-and-so. And some of the Levitical laws and Leviticus and some of the bits and pieces in Deuteronomy I suspect that Christians never read. Or if they do, it's just once and that's it. So there is this in the Bible too, and Christians will testify to a similar experience. But the Qur'an strikes me as slightly different in that the whole of the Qur'an is like that from beginning to end. If it has a beginning and an end, it seems to have no ending. There doesn't seem to be any part of it that doesn't refresh, renew, and stimulate in some way. Whereas parts of the Bible, maybe even most of the Bible, if Christians were honest, is something they ignore. They go to the purple passages, the juicy bits of the Gospels, and the Psalms, and perhaps maybe Isaiah, maybe bits of Genesis, but great chunks of it Christians will not ever revisit again, because once you've read it, why would you want to go back? They're not very interesting, to be honest, for a reader today. But the Qur'an doesn't seem to have that problem for its people who read it spiritually. And so there we are. Should you buy this book? I think it is a very beautifully written book. It is very dense and thorough. It is a PhD thesis, but there are many wonderful stories about conversion stories, about how people just heard the Quran out of the blue and were immediately converted to Islam, right from the time of the Sahaba up to today. But yeah, so there we have it. Until next time.